It's going to be okay. We're almost there. Thank you.
The scream cut through first class like a blade. Passengers froze mid-conversation as a young black girl cried out in pain, clutching her arm while tears streamed down her face. A flight attendant stood over her, rigid and defensive, insisting. She had followed procedure. The cabin, moments earlier wrapped in luxury and quiet privilege, descended into stunned silence. A mother dropped to her knees beside her child, panic flooding her voice as she begged for help. Someone shouted for a doctor. Another passenger whispered, "Her arm doesn't look right." And in that instant between disbelief and fear, one yet understood how catastrophic this moment would become, because what the flight attendant didn't know, what the airline hadn't prepared for, was that this child's father wasn't just waiting at the destination. He was a pilot, a respected veteran of the skies. And when he learned what happened to his daughter, the consequences would reach far beyond this cabin, grounding far more than a single flight. First class is supposed to be safe, controlled, polished. It's designed to project authority, rules enforced smoothly, conflicts resolved quietly, comfort guaranteed at a premium. But safety means nothing when authority is misused. The girl hadn't been disruptive. She hadn't broken a rule that warranted force. She had simply stood up, curious, restless, a child doing what children do. The response she received wasn't guidance, it was aggression disguised as enforcement. This story isn't just about a broken arm. It's about how quickly power can turn dangerous when empathy is absent, and how certain bodies are policed more harshly under the same set of rules. It's about a system that often protects uniforms before people, procedures before children, silence before accountability. What followed would expose more than a single act. It would unravel a pattern, a culture that minimized harm, a reflex, to deny before listening, and a belief that consequences could be managed quietly. But this time they couldn't, because the father who would soon walk into this story understood aviation from the inside out. He understood responsibility, safety, and the weight of trust passengers place in an airline. And he understood something else too, that when institutions fail to protect the vulnerable, someone has to force them to stop. This is the story of how one moment of unchecked authority shattered a child's safety and how calm, deliberate accountability brought an entire airline to a standstill. The flight was supposed to be uneventful. First class hummed with quiet confidence, soft lighting, muted conversations, the gentle clink of glassware. The young black girl sat by the window, legs barely reaching the floor, eyes wide with wonder as clouds drifted past. She leaned forward, curious, lifting herself slightly to see the wing. Her mother watched closely, ready to remind her to sit if needed. Before she could speak, a flight attendant appeared, voice sharp and impatient. She told the child to sit, immediately. The girl startled, trying to comply, but confusion slowed her movements. The attendant's irritation grew in seconds. She repeated the order louder, as if volume could force obedience. The cabin felt the shift. Eyes lifted, shoulders tensed. The mother calmly explained the child was settling down, but the attendant didn't listen. She reached out, grabbing the girl's arm with force meant for restraint, not guidance. The child screamed, a sound of pure pain and terror. The crack was faint, but unmistakable. Silence swallowed the cabin. Then chaos erupted as the girl cried uncontrollably, clutching her arm while her mother fell to her knees, shaking, begging for help. In that instant, luxury meant nothing. Authority meant nothing. Only the child's pain mattered, and it would change everything. The minutes that followed felt unreal. A doctor passenger rushed forward, carefully examining the child's arm while the mother sobbed beside her. The verdict came quietly but clearly. It was broken. The word landed heavily, sinking into every corner of the cabin. The flight attendant stepped back, face tight, insisting it was a misunderstanding. She claimed the child resisted, that she was enforcing safety procedures. Her tone was defensive, rehearsed, almost automatic. The airline crew closed ranks quickly. Another attendant guided the injured child toward the galley while apologizing vaguely, avoiding specifics. Passengers whispered, some recording discreetly, others frozen by disbelief. The captain announced a return to the gate for a medical situation, careful not to explain further. On the ground, paramedics boarded swiftly. The child was carried off, arm immobilized, tears still flowing. Her mother followed, numb with shock. Airline representatives approached with practiced sympathy, offering apologies without admitting fault. They spoke of protocols and investigations. It sounded hollow. What no one in that moment realized was that this wasn't going to end with a quiet settlement or an internal report. This incident had reached someone who knew exactly how airlines worked and how to stop them at the hospital. The reality settled in. X-rays confirmed the fracture. A cast was placed. The child lay exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, flinching at every movement. Her mother sat beside her, anger slowly replacing shock. She replayed the moment again and again, wondering how quickly it escalated, how easily her child was hurt. When the father arrived, still in uniform from his own flight, the room changed. He listened first. He didn't interrupt. He didn't raise his voice. He looked at the cast, at his daughter's bruised arm, at the fear still clinging to her face. He asked simple questions. Names, times, procedures follow, door ignored. As a veteran pilot, he understood safety protocols better than anyone. He knew force was never part of them. This wasn't turbulence or an accident. It was a failure of judgment and restraint. He stepped out into the hallway and made several calls, not angry ones, precise ones. By the time he returned to the room, decisions were already in motion. The airline thought it could contain this. They were wrong. This wasn't about one flight anymore. It was about accountability, and it was about to take off. The airline's initial response followed a familiar pattern. They released a carefully worded statement expressing regret for the incident, emphasizing their commitment to safety while avoiding responsibility. Internally, they attempted to frame it as a one-off mistake, as the flight attendant was placed on temporary leave. Executives hoped the matter would settle quietly. The father wasn't interested in silence. He filed a formal complaint with aviation authorities, detailing violations of safety procedures and child protection standards. He requested cockpit audio, cabin footage, staff histories. As those requests landed, something unsettling emerged. Previous complaints, similar language, patterns of aggressive enforcement, disproportionately involving passengers of color. Investigators took notice. The airline's legal team shifted from calm to concerned. Regulators launched a full inquiry. Flights were delayed as inspections intensified. News outlets caught wind of the story, framing it not as an accident, but as a failure of culture. Passengers began sharing their own experiences. The narrative grew larger than any press release could control. Airlines' confidence wavered as consequences became unavoidable. This wasn't damage control anymore. It was exposure. As the investigation expanded, the truth grew harder to ignore. Training records revealed gaps. Incident reports showed a tendency to minimize passenger complaints. Emails surfaced where concerns were brushed aside in favor of maintaining brand image. The flight attendants' actions were no longer isolated. They were symptoms. Aviation authorities issued temporary groundings for compliance reviews, disrupting schedules nationwide. Stock prices dipped. Executives scrambled. Meanwhile, the family focused on healing. The child began physical therapy, learning to trust. Movement again. Nightmares lingered. The father declined a quick settlement offer, insisting on structural change. He wanted retraining, new protocols, independent oversight. Wanted children protected, not controlled. Public support surged as the story resonated with parents everywhere. The airline issued another statement, this one apologizing directly, announcing policy reforms, acknowledging failures. It was late, but necessary. Accountability had arrived, not through outrage, but through persistence. The grounding wasn't just mechanical, it was moral. Months later, the airline unveiled sweeping reforms. Mandatory de-escalation training. Child safety standards rewritten. Clear bans on physical restraint, except in extreme emergencies. Independent reporting channels. The flight attendant was terminated following the investigation's findings. The father stood beside regulators at a press conference, not as a victor, but as an advocate. He spoke calmly about trust, about how passengers place their lives and their children in an airline's care. He reminded everyone that safety isn't enforced with force, it's earned with respect. The child, cast removed, stood nearby, holding her mother's hand. Healing was ongoing, but strength had returned. The airline resumed operations under scrutiny, changed by consequences it could no longer avoid. The industry took notice. Training manuals were updated elsewhere. Quietly, standards rose. This story doesn't end with applause or revenge. It ends with responsibility. With the understanding that authority without empathy becomes dangerous, and rules without humanity can cause real harm. A child's broken arm exposed a broken system, and a parent's resolve helped fix it. The flight attendant acted in seconds. The consequences unfolded over months. And the lesson remains clear. Power must protect, not punish. Silence may feel easier, but accountability is safer. In the end, the airline was grounded not by anger, but by truth. And that grounding allowed something better to take flight. This story leaves us with a difficult but necessary truth. Safety is not just about rules, uniforms, or authorities, about responsibility. A child trusted the adults around her to protect her, and in that moment, that trust was broken. What followed wasn't justice fueled by anger, but accountability guided by restraint. The father didn't shout. The mother didn't give up. And because they refused to let pain be dismissed as procedure, an entire system was forced to pause, reflect, and change. That pause mattered, reminded an industry and all of us that power must never come at the cost of compassion, especially when children are involved. This isn't just a story about an airline or a flight attendant. It's a reminder of how quickly harm can happen when empathy is absent, and how powerful, calm determination can be when confronting injustice. Every position of authority carries a choice: to dominate or to protect, to escalate or to de-escalate, to silence or to listen. The difference between those choices can shape lives forever. So the next time we witness someone being treated unfairly, especially someone who cannot defend themselves, remember this moment. Change doesn't always begin with outrage. Sometimes it begins with the courage to stand firm, demand better, and refuse to let harm be ignored.